Hello, and welcome to the Right Room with Hilary Phelps. And we're so glad that you're here. And on one of the last days of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we're talking to Beany, and her story of leaving an abusive, narcissistic relationship is heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. It, it's powerful. It could be a little triggering if you or someone you know has been a victim of violence or domestic abuse. But her story of empowerment and resilience is truly incredible. She is such a delight to talk to. We had a great conversation. She is funny, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you. Hi, Beany. Welcome to the Right Room. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Hilary.
I'm so excited to have you here. And we were talking a little bit before record, and like I said, we follow each other on social, and this is the thing I love about social is that you get connected to so many empowering women. And a reel that you posted recently really impacted me in so many ways. And so I'm really grateful that you're here to have this conversation and help other women who are navigating this challenge in their life. And I'd love to hear you and have everybody talk, who is Beany, and Beany, what do you do?
Well, Beany has been many different people.
Love that.
The current Beany is self-regulated. The current Beany is peaceful. The current Beany is able to love herself and the people around her. That has not always been the case for me. And so when I was going through all of my drama and trauma, um, those things were difficult, and I didn't even know I didn't have them. I was just, I was just surviving at all times, for an entire decade. I was just surviving. So,
We're going to get into that. But
yeah,
I love that you started out with grounded and regulated.
yeah,
And that's so beautiful. I love like starting with the beautiful positivity. But like you said, you weren't always in this space. And
no,
even, you're a teacher for a while, you were a stay-at-home mom, you were married,
yeah,
right, for 25 years,
hmm,
kind of before this transition
yeah,
happened in your life. And
yeah.
then
I,
talk a
Yeah, I didn't come from abuse. My family, my mother was not abused. I didn't see abuse. I wasn't surrounded by it. It wasn't something that was familiar to me. I was raised by a single mom with an older sister, younger brother. My dad wasn't really in the picture. I married my high school sweetheart. We were together for 25 years. I was a first grade teacher. I had two boys. You know, I was, on the PTA board. I was on the baseball board. I was the leader of the play group. My sister lived on the street. My mother lived on the street. We had Sunday night dinner. Like it was like this perfect little family. And I think what happened, well, I would say that the loss of a child, my third child, my ex-husband and I lost a child, and that it kind of plummeted things for me. And I just never really recovered.
when
Um,
you talk about plummeted, talk more about that.
yeah,
What
just
do you
my
mean?
mental health. I just was,
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. I didn't like how the people around me dealt with it. It
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
wasn't their fault. I mean, they didn't know what to say or do. And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. Being a mother was the only thing I knew that I wanted to be
Same.
at a pretty young age. And so losing that child just kind of, it just, everything kind of spiraled for me, and I never really came back from it. And I became increasingly unhappy being a stay at home mom. At that point, my kids were older as well.
Mhm.
They were going into, junior high, and they needed me a lot less.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do with myself. I had lost myself in the, 15 years before that. into dumping everything I knew into the people around me. Um, and that was all I knew. And that was how my mother did it. And I just thought that's what you do as a mom.
Yeah.
You are selfless and that's how it's supposed to be.
Yes. How old were you at this time, at this point?
Well, I'm 52 now, so that was, almost 15 years ago. So,
Okay.
I was in my late 30s,
Okay.
early, almost
Yeah.
40. And I just was increasingly unhappy, and I kind of allowed another man to kind of infiltrate my life. He gave me all the things that I didn't have. And I chose to leave my marriage for him. And ultimately, that did not work out so well for me.
Yeah. Talk about we're gonna get to yes. What kinds of things will one two things I want to say. One, I hear this from a lot of women, right? We kind of lose ourselves in our purpose because like you, all I ever wanted to be was a mom. I didn't know where I wanted to live or the job I wanted to do, but my heart and my soul was just wanting to be a
Yeah.
mother. And and women can kind of we lose ourselves in a little bit of our voice, right? Pouring
Mhm.
so much into our families or our partners or our professions,
Mhm.
and we get to that point where we are just tapped out.
Yeah.
Um, and the question I have in that is so you say that, this man came into your life and kind of gave you things that you didn't have. Can you talk more to that? What did those things look like or feel like?
Yeah, it was a lot of words. He used a lot of words that I was just like smitten with.
Yeah.
He, remember that I had been with the same man since I was 16. And so my
Yeah.
ex-husband and I had he was a little bit older than me at 16, but we just, he kind of molded me into what he wanted. And I was young enough that I allowed
Yeah.
him to do that.
Sure.
And so when I tell you that my ex-husband and the abusive man were polar opposites of each other, it couldn't be more like opposite direction.
Yeah.
Opposite directions I went. My ex-husband is a tall blonde surfer.
Okay.
Thin surfer, blonde hair, tan, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
my abusive, you know, the abusive man, I try to avoid saying my using him as like my abusive.
Oh,
Try to avoid that. But anyway,
yeah.
he was a short, muscly, half black, half white, into the gym, couldn't swim. Got
We're totally different. You are not
totally different.
wrong. And probably in personality, I imagine
Absolutely.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. He had super highs and super lows. My ex was very even keeled, a psych major, just
Wow.
very, very, very different.
Yeah.
And at the time, it just appealed to me. It was I felt like he also was a little like, he was a partier and crazy, and he was like had could work a room, and that was not my ex-husband at all. We were not partiers. I did not really have that as part of my life for,
Yeah.
until I was 40, until I met him, until I met the abusive.
Mhm.
And so it was just all appealing. It was like that bad boy, attraction that, some of us have.
And it probably talk a lot about that here. And it probably felt exciting, right? You've
Right.
been like your kids were older and you've been with this man since high school, your ex-husband. Um, and it's kind of this, yeah, like I mean, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of like Cinderella or like this, like, ooh, this is exciting, trying new things. And this person, I say the word salad, the word salad that they're using with me and to
Yeah. The other
win me over.
should probably mention this. I met him in a gym. He was a trainer.
Okay.
And I was constantly trying to lose weight. I was constantly unhappy with my body, and I had joined this boxing gym. And he just kind of took to me, and he liked how I worked out, or so he said, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
he's throwing all sorts of words
Mhm.
at me. But he was a black belt in jujitsu. He just he had a he had this bad boy thing about him.
Yeah.
Um, but he also helped me lose a significant amount of weight, and he helped me change my body um, pretty significantly. And so I felt like we were this like great team. He would say things like, I've never met anybody who works as hard as you, and you are special, and all the things that my
In the
husband of
beginning.
25 years was never going to say. Um, and so it was appealing. And so, that trauma bond happened for me pretty quickly.
So
Um,
talk about trauma bond for anybody that
yeah.
doesn't understand it, because I know you're trauma informed
Mhm.
coach now. So
Yeah.
talk about what
Yeah.
that means. What does a
A
trauma bond mean?
yeah, a trauma bond is a really unhealthy emotional attachment to someone who causes you physical, emotional, financial, sexual harm. And it is very common that it develops in romantic relationships, but it can also happen in a family dynamic as well. A child can be trauma bonded to their parent, and it is just like addiction. I compare it to that because although I have never been addicted to a substance, I 100% was addicted to this man. And no matter what he did to me, I came back. It wasn't always him pursuing me back. Often it was me going back to him. And so,
That makes sense. Like,
yeah,
and
it's
I've
all the
never
same
thought of it.
chemicals. It's all the same chemicals in your brain that
Yeah.
are happening through addiction. Cortisol, and like it's all the same things. Um, and I didn't believe it could be true because I was like, I've never been addicted to anything before. I didn't have an issue with alcohol. I didn't have an issue with drugs. Not that I didn't
Yeah.
do any of those things. I just
Right,
didn't,
right.
I just
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't have an issue with them. Um,
Yes.
so, but with him, I 100% was addicted to this person who was extremely toxic and harmed me on a daily basis.
And at this time, you didn't have that language then. So you didn't go
No,
into this like, this is a trauma bond and I
yeah,
can't break it, right? You're still kind of in the
yeah,
throes of this. He makes me feel really good and he's a great man. Okay.
yeah. And I had given up so much for him that I was determined to make it
Mm.
work.
What
And
had you given up?
well, I had given up my family. I had given up.
Because you left yeah.
Yeah, I'd given up my husband, where I lived, my sister stopped talking, my mother stopped talking to me. Like I lost everything. I had no money, and so I just thought, you know what, I am gonna dig my claws in, and I'm gonna make this work because this
Gonna
is
hold on.
yes, I'm gonna be that pit bull that never lets go. Which
You know what?
tends to be my personality a little bit. I'm pretty black or white, which has not always, I'm trying to
Yeah.
master that gray area.
The gray area is hard. The unknowing, it is hard. That's
No.
not uncommon. Um, That's okay. So I was just sorry. I was going back to that because we also talk about that in addiction, right? That like unwillingness to let go. And I remember when I was in recovery, they were like, if you're holding on to rocks, you can't pick up the flowers. And I remember being like, that's so
Mm,
stupid. Now I'm like, but that's, oh, no. Oh,
right.
now I get it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, so you'd moved.
So I mean, I was with him. I'll be honest that there were red flags from the get.
Share
Uh,
some of those because some
yeah.
women listening might be like, because I feel like there's always like we have this intuition, right? Women have intuition and we have like this doesn't the way I described a relation it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Something is off, but like you, I'm like, I can't let go. It's gonna work. And so can you, and looking back, right? Hindsight's always so for somebody listening, if there's a woman listening that maybe has that feeling like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it doesn't feel right. What are some of those red flags that started to come up for you?
Yeah, right away, some of those red flags are very physical. It's those butterflies that you feel in your belly. I don't know that they're butterflies. You know,
Mm.
they might not be butterflies. They might be your system telling you, hey, step back a little bit. And for me, it was like, instead of, uh, say, not my monkey, not my circus, um, I
Love
was like
that.
all in. I was like, I want the monkeys. I want the circus. Like this.
This is excitement. This isn't chaos. This is excitement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so those were all red flags. Like how I physically felt was a huge red flag, that I just completely ignored and thought that it was butterflies from excitement, and that was a good thing. And how quickly things progressed. Um, Also another huge red
Yeah.
flag. Um,
What do you mean by that? Like how quickly? Like talk a little bit about that so women are,
yeah,
because sometimes I think there's like the fairy tale princess, right? Like at least I was like, oh, it's so like this is a dream. Like, oh, this never, and I'm different. You
yes,
can talk about that. Like what
yeah.
does the progression look like?
Yeah, so the progression for me was like we moved in together like almost immediately. Like,
Hmm.
I left, my husband, and I moved in with him.
Hmm.
Um I and then, he started calling me his wife. Like, we weren't married. He didn't have a ring on my finger, but he would introduce me as his wife. And that was just his possession. He was very possessive of me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and it just was red flag after, I mean, looking
Hmm.
back on it, it's
Hmm.
red flag after red flag. His temper, was, I called it passionate at the time, not so much. I mean, look
Yes.
at the hindsight. You look back on it all right now, and I just think, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
how did I not see all of these red flags? Of course, all of his exes were crazy. Um,
Yep.
as I'm sure I am now to whoever,
Yeah. Yeah.
whoever he's with now. Um, so a lot, hindsight, and you don't know until you know. And now I will never unsee it.
Yeah. And there's, yes, I mean, the body never lies, right? And it's the brain that tells us different. Like you're saying, like that feeling in your son, you're like, oh, it's not this, it's excitement, it's passion, it's
Mhm.
not aggressive, it's passionate. And so what was that like? So you moved in, there was possessiveness, there was, I
Yeah.
mean, what else were there? What else, how did it progress for you from um, noticing kind of, I don't know, to full on, I got to
Yeah.
get out of here?
I remember one of our first big fights was, he wasn't physical with me, but he had frustrated me so much that I remember, slamming the car door and telling him to fuck off, which
Mm.
I had never told another person to fuck off before, let alone somebody I loved.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so I just thought, oh my gosh, he knows, he's pushing all my buttons. He's making me absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Um, and then it progressed to maybe throwing a drink in my face, or it progressed to him spitting in my face. Um, and the makeups from those, the apologies, and the several weeks following those incidences at the beginning were
Hmm.
absolute bliss. They were what I always envisioned our relationship could be like. He I fell in love with somebody that didn't exist unless he was apologizing.
Yeah.
Those were the only times where he lived up to what I thought he could be. Um, and so those apologies, those 2 weeks of apologies and being the perfect partner held me for a long time, because I was always striving to get that 2 weeks of what our life was like in those 2 weeks. I was constantly striving for that, thinking, okay, this time it's going to last. This time it's going
Yes.
to last. And it doesn't ever last. I mean, it just,
It's so much like addiction, it really is, and now I can't unsee this, right? Because it's like the what do they call it? The definition of insanity is, you know,
Yeah.
thinking it's gonna be different. It's going
Yeah.
back to the same thing, thinking it's gonna be different, repeating the pattern, thinking it's gonna be different. And what you know, how I think of it too, it's like the steam valve, right? They blow off the steam, they get really mad, aggressive, violent, whatever, and then they'd be fine. It was,
Right.
you know, it's like there's no healthy way to
Right.
release this anger, aggression,
Right.
emotion, and then you're left like, now what? And then they're kind, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen. Okay, I like this version. And so, how much, you know, your system, how much your emotional system, physical system, mental system just took
Yeah.
time and time again. It's so dissettling and dysregulating. And
So dysregulating, and I didn't know it at the time. At the time,
mhm.
I was just keeping my head above water, and I was just trying. I was just living for, those brief moments of happiness, until, then.
And at this point, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So at this point too, have you been kind of secluded from friends and family? Have you been kind of sequestered?
Yeah,
What was that like?
both by him and myself. I would say I did it to myself a little bit. I was embarrassed that I had left my family for him.
Yeah.
Um, my He was very possessive of me, so he didn't want me out of his sight. He was in constant contact with me, like on our texting and calling, and and it felt amazing. Honestly, at first, that was like, oh, this is so great. I would go all day long and never text my ex-husband, and he had no idea where I was all day long. And this guy, he wanted to know every single place I was going and who I was with, and I was happy to oblige. But it got to a point where he just he wouldn't tell me you can't go out with so and so, but if I did ever go out with girlfriends, um, there would be drama that would ensue because of it. And so I learned quickly to just stop asking, that it was just, my life was
Yeah.
easier if I didn't go out with anybody.
Yeah.
And it just, it helped to minimize the drama in my life, if I didn't do it.
And talk about, or how were holidays?
Oh, God. A sure sign of a narcissist is someone who destroys, every special occasion, every holiday. And he certainly did that every single special occasion. There would
Yeah.
be some kind of drama. He was not a very traditional kind of guy when it came to holidays anyway. And, I was still attempting to be with my children and, have a Christmas tree and decorate. And he was not having any of that. So, um, it
And then
was,
how did that yeah, how did that impact you then? I mean, so did you kind
it
of
just,
change to adapt to him, or did kind
absolutely,
of to
yeah,
prevent any
I did. Unfortunately, everything I did was to appease him, because I knew what it would look like if he wasn't appeased. Um,
Mhm.
but of course that didn't work either. There's nothing that I could have done
No.
to make this man settled.
How long were you together?
A decade, 10 years.
And tell me how this, if this resonates, right? It's kind of like in the beginning, there's well, yeah, it's the cycle. We all know this, the love bombing, right? And so you're there, and then it starts to pull away, and then you kind of get deeper into it. I'm using my hands if you're listening, kind of, and you're getting deeper into the relationship where then it becomes possession, like
Yeah,
you're saying, and you don't know how to get out of it.
yeah,
I mean, meaning, I know I read something, and I'd love to get your thought on this. I don't know. I think it was, are you familiar with Bruce Perry?
yeah.
The trauma. And so I was reading his book, and it was talking about, you know, how the trauma response, right? Like how we operate from a brain stem. And
Right.
when you're stuck in this space of possession, control, manipulation, domination, aggression, all of this, you're stuck in survival mode. And when your body and your your nervous system becomes stuck in survival mode, you can't get to that top portion of your brain that makes sense, that can make rational decisions. And so, and when they say, why don't abuse, what people, he's doing X, Y, and Z to you. Why don't you just leave?
Yeah.
Because you literally can't. Right? I mean, does that sound
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
accurate to you and how your experience? So
Yeah.
what made you say I can't anymore?
Yeah. It was a long process. I'll tell you, about 7 years in was when everything kind of hit the fan. All of his infidelities came to the surface, and um, he wasn't hiding as much. He wasn't doing a good job of hiding what his life was outside of me.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the point where I started to begin to research. I started to educate myself. I started to get language and read books and listen to podcasts. And I thought, I didn't even know what a narcissist was at that point.
And
I
how long ago was this? 3
that
years ago?
was I was 7 years deep into it, and so that was about 6 years ago.
Okay.
So I've been out for 3 years.
What led you to that? What delivered that narcissistic word into your brain? Like, how did you first come to understand?
It was social media, honestly. I think it was me scrolling and listening to other people's stories.
Yeah.
Um, John Kim, he wrote a book called I used to be a miserable fuck. Yeah.
Great title.
And it actually is geared more towards men. But it was a book that I began to read, and I just thought, oh, okay, yes, that's him, and that's him, and that's like he was checking all the boxes. And then I don't know, I kept reading, I kept listening to podcasts, and I just thought, okay, I know what's wrong now. So what do I
Yeah.
do? I go to him and I say,
Of course.
"Hey, look, I figured out what's wrong. We can
I
fix
can help you. We can still make this work. I
yes,
can. Yeah.
yes." Um,
How did that go?
yeah, no, that didn't work out so well for me either. Slow learner I was, but
I get it. No, I get it. You're like, if you just understand, let me just help you understand. And then
then we can fix
that
this.
doesn't work.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
no,
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so that was the point where I began to accept him for who he really was, and the fact that he was not going to change. And I call this absolute acceptance, where you are getting
Mm.
real with yourself. It's time to like look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, no more pretending, no talking yourself into bullshit, no empty promises, accept him for who he really is. Um, and I'd like to say that that was like this process that just, and I moved on to the next.
Like a light switch.
Yeah.
It was.
No, wasn't
Yeah.
like that either. 3 years later, I finally left. It was 3 years of constant back and forth. Now, for those 3 years, he was in and out of my home many times, and it switched more from um, not me not wanting to leave, but me being scared to death of leaving. His abuse increased significantly. And it just got to a point that this was where I really started to, I learned what gaslighting was. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to start videoing, and I'm going to start audio recording conversations, and I'm going to start journaling, and I'm going to keep a log of like dates and incidences and things where I was like, I don't think I'm crazy, but he keeps telling me I'm crazy, and he keeps telling me that I'm overreacting. So maybe I am. And so all of
Yeah.
those logs and all of those, video recordings, audio recordings, journalings, I was able to go back and watch them and be like, holy shit, like I am in an abusive relationship. And up to that point, I would have told you I wasn't. Um, and so that was a daunting time where I just was it was a big slap in the face, like, holy shit. And then it all kind of came to, like, I'm not the first one he's done this to. I know of 5 other women before me, and the 2 women while he was with me, that he has done that to as well. And, like, it all just kind of like, wow,
Yeah.
this is my life, and I gotta figure out how to get the hell out. And I didn't know how. I tried too many times to count. I went no contact.
Yeah.
I created physical distance multiple times. Um, and what those things did for me every time I failed, or, I say failed, but it's not failed. That's not what I tell my clients, because every time you attempt something, you learn a little bit more about the next time. And I'm
Mm.
sure you know that. I'm sure there were relapses that,
It's
you know,
not good or bad. It's all
right,
information on how to proceed to the next step. Yeah.
right, right. And so, every time brought me closer to the last time.
Yeah.
And um I finally escaped. And
I
it
want
was
to,
an escape.
it was an escape. Yeah. I want to go back to something you said because um, I did similar somethings. When something didn't feel right, there was one time, and I just took a note.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, it's that intuition. This doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
And maybe it won't happen again, but if it does, I want to have an
Documentation.
accurate remembering of what is going on right now, right? And so for me, I kept notes for years of
Mhm.
things that didn't feel right, and I found them the other day.
Yeah. That
Painful.
just brings it gives me the chills a little bit, because I know what it's like to read back.
And in the moment, when I was writing it, I was like, "It doesn't feel right," but I never used the words wrong, harmful,
Mm.
nothing like that. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? I'm like, "Well, this just maybe it's a bad day.
Right.
Maybe it's just a bad day, or maybe it is me."
Mhm.
Because I feel like, using myself, and it sounds like women get so deep into it that they're like, "It'll be different tomorrow. It's a
Mhm.
bad day," right? These excuses of and so I wanted to just double down on that and share that because I think for me that was a really helpful thing, and it sounds like for you that was a really helpful, um, and the video camera too. My attorney said to me, "Videos are always good. For one, it either shows what they're doing, or two, it makes them stop in the moment because they realize they're about to do it." And so for any woman that's listening, that's something, those two things I think are really powerful. Simple, not easy, but simple things. If something just feels a little off,
Yeah, yeah,
could you add anything to that?
yeah, what I can say to that is that, I have shared a lot of the videos that I have on social media. And
Yeah.
oftentimes I will get people that, clap back with, why don't, why are you recording him instead of calling the police? And for me,
Because the court system's set up for women, isn't it?
yeah, for me, I knew that if he knew that I was recording him, that the incident itself would go a lot different.
Yeah.
He, I have one where he's got his foot on. I was a personal trainer at the time, and it was during COVID, and so I was online, and he had his feet on my computer, so he was right. He was going to break my computer, and I had him on video. And when he saw that I was videoing him, he pushed the computer away. He then proceeded to go and pick up a hammer and come towards me with the hammer, um, but he ultimately put the hammer down because he knew I was videoing him.
Mm.
And so for me, my first line of defense was always my camera. When I felt like shit was about to go down and it was going to get bad, I always grabbed for my phone or my camera. In addition to, the other part of that is being able to look back on it myself and think, yeah, it was as bad as I thought it was. And, having all that documentation was really important for me. And finally making that decision to break free.
Yeah. And what was that? Was there one ultimate decision, or was it kind of a culmination of everything that
Yeah.
you just was like, "It's
Um,
done"?
so 3 years, almost 4 years, 4 years in March, I was diagnosed with cancer. Um, and I thought, oh my God, he my nervous system was so dysregulated that my body was fighting the wrong things. And I wholeheartedly believe that had my life not been living in fight or flight for the decade before that, that I would not have had
Yeah.
breast cancer. And so, it was that diagnosis where I thought, Beanie, like, wake the fuck up. What are you doing? Like, you have choices. You can do different. You might not like all of the choices that you have, but you always have choices. And and it was that point where I just thought, you know what? No matter what, I'm getting out. And we had lived together. Um, I moved out in the middle of the night so that he wouldn't know where I was. I got an apartment for by myself. Um, for the first time in my life. I was, 48, 49,
Yeah.
and I had this beautiful apartment in San Diego in this, downtown Little Italy urban area. It was gorgeous. I was so excited. I thought that I was going to have a double mastectomy, and I thought that I was going to be recovering in that apartment by myself. And he found me the day I moved in. He drive through the neighborhood, combed the neighborhoods, and he found me, and he threatened to kill my children if I didn't let him move in with me. And so for the next 3 months, he lived on and off with me, between me and, another woman whom he had been with ultimately for our entire relationship, and who I think he is still with. Um, and I was sitting on my couch one day. I was completely isolated. I was scared to leave my house. I have memories of like trying to meditate on my living room floor and him pounding on the door, telling me he was going to kill me and that I better open up. And I remember just sitting there with my eyes closed, trying to breathe. And I just, I started to try to manifest, and I didn't know I was manifesting it at the time. I just was like dreaming, like, oh my, this is what I need. I just signed this lease on this beautiful apartment, but I need to get out. I owned a home in San Diego. My children are in San Diego. My family is in San Diego. But I need out. I need to live on a farm, or I need to, work on a ranch. I need to live somewhere for free and keep my apartment in San Diego was what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And I was flipping through social media, which I did a lot of at that time because I was so isolated. Um, and I came across a woman's post who told a similar story about how she escaped from Oregon to Florida. And she had a small little hobby farm. And I made a comment on her post, and she commented back, and we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And we jumped on a phone call for about 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes call, she offered me to come stay with her for a week.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Like earth angels, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I packed my bags, in that time, I booked the flight the next day. And it was about a month out before I was leaving. And in that month, he was in and out of my life. I didn't tell anybody where I was going or that I was going. And, I had spent the weekend before I left with him. And I remember him saying on that Monday morning, "Where does this leave us?" And I said, "It leaves us nowhere." And he walked out the door, and I never saw him again. Now, I'd like to tell you that it was that smooth. Um, I, I have not ever seen him again, but going no contact oftentimes really escalates situations. So, his pursuit of me ramped up quite a bit. Um, I packed my bags for a week. I flew to Florida. I went no contact, and he ended up, you know, stalking my home. I have ring camera,
Wow,
of him, at my front door and peeking through my garage and going to my mom's house and my children's house and telling me, they're home. Your mom's lights on. Um, and then he found me. He found me in Florida, and he came to Florida, and
do you
he
know how he found you?
well, I created an LLC for myself, because I was trying to create an Airbnb business. I
Okay,
was trying to figure out how I was gonna make money.
this is in Florida.
This is in
You
Florida.
created the LLC,
Yes, I
and he
created
found
the
you.
LLC in Florida, and he found me in the city that I was in. Um, and
Wow,
he came. He emailed me multiple times saying, "I want you to meet me here. I want you to wear this, sit here, bring this, do this, all this creepy stuff." And I didn't
control.
do it, but he showed up. He showed up, and he continued. He just was relentless, just constant no caller IDs and calling me from Google numbers and email after email. And, he was blocked on everything. But if somebody wants to get a hold of you, they're going to, they can create new accounts and get new numbers. And so it just was constant until I finally had enough. And I exposed him. I started off with just telling my story. I just grabbed my phone and I went on TikTok and pushed record, and I just told my story is how it started. And he continued. He saw it and didn't like it.
Yeah,
Ordered me to remove it. And when I didn't, he continued. And then I started showing his face and his name and his business and, his screenshots and audio recordings and all of that, documentation that I had. I just exposed him.
and
And,
could he have come back with defamation or, like, talk about that? Because I feel like that's a threat that people
yeah,
can
it definitely
use, like,
was a threat.
"If you don't stop, I'm gonna sue you," right? And so what allowed you or what prevented him from suing you in that case or coming after you legally?
Yeah. Well, what prevented it was because it was all true.
And
It
so it's a threat, right? They use that as a threat, and you're like, "It's"
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
To
there's video proof. Here I am laying in bed. Here I am laying in bed, and
Yeah.
you come in my room. You crawled through my window
Wow.
into my home and attacked me while I lay in bed, and I have video of it.
Yeah,
Like,
you can't dispute that.
you can't dispute it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, so he didn't pursue anything. And quite honestly, I was prepared. I just was like, this is just what's gonna like. I was ready. If he pursued, I was willing to take it,
Yeah.
whatever was coming, because it felt like I needed to a few things. I needed to protect other women, from him specifically.
Mhm.
That was my motivation at the beginning. It's changed now that I've, kind of done some work, and
Yeah.
I don't feel as vindictive as maybe I did at the beginning. Um, but it validated so much of, the last 10 years of my life. And
Yeah. Can
so,
you talk about, like could you talk briefly about the emotional kind of the emotional cycle, right? Because I imagine there's anger, shame, sadness, regrets. Like, what was that process like for you from kind of leaving, um, and then to where you are now?
yeah, I was different in that I healed out loud.
Mm,
Every step of my healing process, I documented on social media.
okay.
And specifically on TikTok is kind of where I have the biggest following. And it really was, it was a lot of rumination. It was a lot of like going back and just constantly thinking about my past and what I could have done differently and why wasn't I able to leave. And then it was, I continued to educate myself, and I was learning about, my childhood attachments, and why I was the way I was. And then I met Cliff pretty early on, and I'll be honest,
And who's Cliff?
Cliff is my fiance.
Okay.
Yes, Cliff is my fiance. I met him very early on. We became friends to begin with, and um, he was a huge part of my healing. A huge, huge part of my healing. And I was scared to death because I was like, I am going to be alone. I had never been alone. I hadn't
We're
been
so
alone since I was
similar.
15. And so, like, I
Yes.
was ready. I'm gonna be alone. I'm gonna
Yes.
be single. I'm gonna
This
embrace.
is my time.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was ready. And then
Yes.
I met Cliff, and it just was easy. I was never at a point with Cliff where I was trying to impress him. In fact, I probably was doing the opposite. I was like, "Bleh," like he knew everything. I did not hold back at all with him. And he's been through some shit as well. He's a widower. He was coming off of a very toxic relationship as well. So we really bonded quickly.
Yes. So we have some similarities, especially here, in that when I met my current partner, we were friends for a long time first. And like you said, because it was just safe. And so
Yeah,
I shared anything and
yeah,
everything. And because there was no,
right,
we're just friends, right?
right.
Like it was a really intimate, deep connection quickly in that space. And then, but there's a difference, right? There's a difference in that quick connection versus the love bombing connection,
Yes.
right? Can
Yeah.
you draw a parallel to that and explain kind of the two? Is that, or can you put it into words, or it's because I know it's a feeling, right? Like we talk about feeling in the beginning, feeling like something's off versus like, now I know. Like you're not in the love bombing, you're trying to
Yes.
convince yourself it's something, but you
Yes.
kind of know. Is that accurate
Yeah.
now?
With the abusive man, everything was crazy and passionate, and like, and I thought that's what love was. Like, that's how it should be. And with
Yeah.
Cliff, it was like this slow burn. It was like this slow burn. And I would say that I'm a pretty trusting person, generally. And so I trusted him, and he has never, ever, 3 years later, given me a reason not to trust him. He did he does what he says he's going to do. His words matter. His actions match up with his
They've,
words. Um,
yes.
he he has my best interest at all times. Like, even if it does not benefit him, he will always recommend that I do, what's best
Yes.
for me. And he's a special dude. Let me tell you, he is a special, special guy. And I feel extremely fortunate. I feel like we both feel extremely fortunate. Um, and it's not one sided.
Mm,
I think that in that previous relationship, he
yeah.
felt like he was like I should be the lucky one.
Yes, you're the sidecar. You're
Right.
in the shadow. Like you walk behind me. Yes.
Right.
Where this one, and this is what I talk about mine. I call him my partner.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not engaged because it's a partnership and
Yeah.
both there's like, it's
Yeah.
equal, right? And I don't say like a balance or I'm moving my hands like a seesaw, right? Like it's because some days it's more him, some days it's more me, but it always balances depending on who needs it most. And
Right.
there's no competition,
Exactly.
right? Like, yes.
Yeah. And
Oh,
so
Beanie, that's so
it feels pretty amazing to be in the space that I am now, 3 years later. Like I said, it was a lot of work getting here. And I think that I think it's important for people. There's a few things that
mhm.
I think,
Yes, share.
yeah, unpopular truths about healing. Um, One is that I don't believe that healing takes a lifetime. I believe that
Mm,
healing can have a beginning and it can have an end, and that it needs to be
Yeah.
done purposefully and intentionally. I really hate the idea of feeling like I have to heal from this specific man
Mm.
or this specific incident forever. Like I
Yeah.
believe it that it gives, this specific person more power than
Yes.
he deserves. And so I do believe that I can learn from, I can grow from, and I can evolve from that experience. But I'd like to think that that healing doesn't take a lifetime. The other unpopular truth that I have is that you I don't believe you have to forgive the person who purposefully, repeatedly, and without remorse hurt you physically, emotionally, sexually, however they hurt you. And that bypassing that emotion of not being able to forgive, I feel like it just kind of traumatizes you all over again when people say you have to forgive in order to move on. Um, I believe that the only person I have to forgive is myself for the
Yes, I
things
love
that
that.
I have, that things that I did, the choices I made when I was, just trying to survive.
I like the thought. I say person is my greatest teacher
Mm.
because they show me
Yeah, exactly.
what areas of myself like lacking self-love, not
Mhm.
standing up for myself, not finding a voice, like all of those things. It's like, okay, well, that was a really big lesson, universe. I
Yeah.
would have, I won't do that again, but thank you so much. And I'm going to move. Yes, I'm going to
Yes.
navigate this with grace. Try to navigate, right?
Universe, I hear you this
I
time.
see. Yeah, this time, right? I know I missed the lesson the first two times,
Yes,
but I got it this time. I will find my voice. I will stand my truth. I got it. Okay, thank you. Lesson
exactly.
learned.
Yeah.
Um, and so Beanie, now you work with women, right? And I love this. I like from pain comes purpose, right? And can you share about some of the work that you're doing now with women um, who are navigating the same situation?
Yeah, I started breakthroughs with Beanie about, I don't know, it's been about 6 months now.
Okay.
So it's still brand new, and I have an opportunity to work with women who have been through things very similar to me, who are just now starting to, put definitions and vocabulary to what has happened to them.
Mhm.
More specifically, I work with them to break their trauma bonds. And, ideally, the women that I work with have already left the relationship
Yeah.
and they are struggling to move on. And it's a tough spot. I have seen women move on too quickly
Mhm.
and not have done the work, and then they end up
Mhm.
repeating the pattern.
Mhm.
Um, and then I've seen other women who just are stuck, like they
Yeah.
feel stuck. Um, they're not stuck, but they feel stuck in just not being able to move on. And I think, I work a lot with mindset. I work a lot with routine, creating a routine. And I mean, you're an athlete, the
Mhm.
power of a routine and the power of accountability. And
Yeah.
so, as a
That's
coach,
yep. Yep.
accountability is like, it's it's everything. It's everything. And so I love what I do. I love working one-on-one with the women that I get to work with.
Yeah.
And it feels like a full circle moment for me.
I
Um,
love that what you accountability. It's
yeah.
so true. I feel like whether it's navigating addiction recovery, sobriety, toxic or abusive relationships, or, fill in the blank, whatever challenge or transition that somebody's going through, having accountability is so important
So
because otherwise we slip back, right? Like I know without my friends or without my community in the different challenges and transitions I've navigated in my life, without them, I would have slipped back in a second.
yeah.
And so having that was a beautiful point of bringing that up, just having accountability in a
Yeah.
coach is so
Yeah,
important.
and for me, Cliff was my accountability.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was, he was that person that was so incredibly patient with me. But not everybody has that, and
Yeah. Yes.
accountability is huge. It's one of the biggest things that I feel like I provide for my clients.
And
Because
so
I also have clients that are so well versed. They've done all the therapy. They know what to do. They know what to do, but
yeah.
nobody is holding them accountable to
Mhm.
actually doing it. And I think
Yes.
that's like the big difference between therapy and coaching is,
Yes.
that, it's a little less formal, and, I'm in touch with my clients daily,
Yes.
between our weekly sessions, I'm in touch with them every day. They write to me every morning what their
Mhm.
gratitude is, and so having that accountability and being able to diminish that overwhelming feeling of like, oh my God, what do I do next? Like
Yes.
I don't know what to do after I get out of bed.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, like you know, I coach and I work with women too, I
Yeah,
say in all transitions, but yes, and that's one of the things where like I just love I'm like, because these aha moments and these breakthroughs or these breakdowns,
yeah.
right,
Mhm.
don't always happen in our session.
No,
They're those in between moments. And so to your point, like therapy and coaching is different in that way, which
yeah,
like you, I love it
yeah.
because you see the breakthroughs,
Mhm.
or you also see a woman stand up for herself and ask for help, which is also powerful because for someone that's been silenced for so long, asking for help can feel like too much. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be a burden. And it's
Mhm.
like, I want you to. Like,
Yeah. Well, this is what I
like,
do. This
I'm,
is what
yes, I'm
I
so, yes, I love this. But I remember when I got sober, I didn't understand that. You know, like I had a sponsor and she's like, call me anytime. And I'm like, I don't want to bother
Yeah.
you. And then when I did, I felt better. She felt better because she's helping. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like this powerful, beautiful thing that us women get to do for
Mhm.
each other
Yeah.
is help one another. And I love that you're doing this. I love that you've used your voice. I love that you truly share so openly everything that you've gone through because I think through those stories, someone sees something in you and you give them hope that they can get through it too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm sure you do the same.
Thank you.
We are similar, I think, in a lot of ways. So I appreciate that.
We are. Yes. And so if we're going to share everything in the show notes, but what are three things that were really important to you that can kind of transition into any area of healing or wellness that a woman is looking to transition, in out of
Yeah.
one situation into what are three things that were or a phrase or an activity or exercise? What are three things that really helped you when you
Yeah.
were transitioning?
A few things. Keeping an open mind about everything and realizing that how you heal, who helps you heal,
Mhm.
where you heal, it may not look the way you imagined it would look.
I
Um,
love that.
I certainly envisioned not, did not envision strangers to be the people that would pull me up.
Mhm.
And I certainly did not expect it to be in Florida.
From California? That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I never left. When I packed my
When you
bags for a week, I never went home. I stayed. I had my car shipped to me, and so I started an entire new life on acreage. I live on farmland, and I am surrounded by farm
You
animals.
manifested that. You
So,
oh, I love this.
my healing process does not look the way I imagined it would look. So that would be one. Um, Number two is give yourself grace. Be so kind to yourself. And, for like I said before, the things that you did, the things that you put up with, when you were literally just trying to survive. And I think that giving yourself grace is kind of like this umbrella of what we need to do for ourselves. In addition to all the journaling and the the positive affirmations and all the laundry list things that you and I both know are so important. But I think giving yourself grace
And
Um,
compassion and
yeah,
compassion. I just
compassion.
want to check because that's something in work self and right because we've
Yeah,
had enough negative talk for a
right,
long time. We don't
right.
need to talk negatively to ourselves too, right?
Exactly, exactly. I feel like I had a coach for 10 years that was just, built just knocking me down, and now I am coached to, build myself up. The third one I would say is seek connections. I think that I believe that genuine, authentic connections are what makes us truly happy. And, starting over at 50 doesn't exactly lend itself to making it easy to find those connections. And so I think it's really important that we are proactive about finding those connections because they don't just present themselves like maybe they used to when you have small children or your kids are in school or um and so being genuine with others, it's always, I think you'll always be surprised at what comes back to you when you are able to be genuine.
Those are beautiful and authentic. I love that because, and I think that's the one thing, good thing about social media is that there really is this connection community, but I think we don't have to. I like to then extend beyond that, right? Meaning like in-person connection or
Yeah.
phone call or even a Zoom,
Yeah.
not just the connection on Instagram or TikTok, but it does introduce us to a lot of people. Um, it brought us together and
Yes.
it brings people into our life, I think, that are able to teach us things or connect with us in
Right.
ways that we wouldn't have before them. Any last minute aha moments, anything you want to share, anything that's calling to you?
um I feel incredibly grateful for where I am in this moment. And, I just posted, I think, on a story this morning about how I was brushing my teeth yesterday. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, wow, you look peaceful. You look self regulated. You
Yeah.
look like, and I've been that way for a while, but it every so often it just hits me. And I just think
Mm.
I have no drama. I am happy with where I am, what I'm doing, who I'm with. And and it feels amazing. And so anybody has that ability to get that. And you know, don't
And you're,
don't feel stuck. Don't feel stuck because you're not stuck. You
yeah,
have a whole team of people out here that want to help you, and I'm living proof of all of it, honestly. All
my
of
words exactly. I was going to say, and you're the shining light that holds true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Oh, Beanie, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a powerful, emotional, wonderful connection and conversation. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.